Experts by experience. Real conversations, real people, real stories.
Welcome back to another episode of our Experts by Experience podcast. Today we have another exciting guest. We have Meg, who is here from Kids Matter, and she's going to be talking to us about the parenting programs that she runs in prison. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello. So Meg, can you tell us a little bit about you and the role that you do at Kids Matter?
My name is Meg, and I am Kids Matter's prison delivery manager. I've been at Kids Matter almost 3 years. And yeah, I run parenting programs with dads in prisons. At the moment, we're in H&P Brixton and H&P Wormwood Scrubs, but we're just about to go into different prisons, which is very exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Branching out. And I know you do so much exciting work in those workshops. Today, we're going to hear a little bit about kind of what you get from that, what the guys that you work with get from that, and also why the format is so important as well. So let's start by talking about, the close proximity that you work with parents in prison. And when people ask you about that work, when people are like, Meg, tell me about your work, what do you want to say first?
What a good question. I would say, firstly, that it's a huge privilege what I do. I always say to people that I love and people I talk to about my job that I have the best job in the world because I get to go into a space that a lot of people don't get to go in and meet really interesting people and get to talk to them about the things that is the closest to them, right? Their families, the people that they love. And I just get to be myself, which is very cool. So a lot of the time, it doesn't really feel like work. It just feels like I get to have very open and beautiful conversations with human beings that want to be in the room, which is, a privilege in itself. But yeah, I would say it's a privilege.
I love that.
Yeah.
When you tell people about the work that you do, what do you think surprises people? And is there anything that, when you're talking about work, do people really want to know?
It's always surprising. I think when people, when I meet someone that maybe doesn't know who I am and they're like, oh, what do you do for work? And I'm like, I run parenting programs in prisons. They're like, whoa, because it's just a space, isn't it, that people don't necessarily think about all the time. So it's unusual when you hear someone, I guess, working, in that space. But I think people have such a perception of what prison's like. And I think the question that I get asked most is like, are you scared when you go in? Is it really, really scary?
Yep.
And, it's a prison and there is really serious things that are happening in that space. And, it can be emotionally volatile sometimes. But, all the people in there are human beings with feelings and complicated lives. And, so I don't ever feel scared. And the thing that I feel like a huge sense of privilege over is that the dads that I work with choose to be in the space. So the dads coming to the program is not them. It's not a punishment. They don't, it's not enforced. And I think right at the beginning of when we did this, like the prisons were thinking like, oh, should this be enforced? And we didn't want that at all because we want dads and men in the room to want to be there and want to be active in speaking about their families, speaking about role of dad. And so, I'm very lucky that all the guys that come into that space want to be there and they work really hard and really listen to each other. But,
I wonder, talking about what happens in that space when you're in prison and you're running those parenting programs, a lot of the narrative in society is like, if somebody who is a parent is pulled out of society and incarcerated, they're literally removed from our everyday society, right? And I think a lot of social narrative is like parenting stops. And I'm curious about what you've seen in that theme. Does parenting stop? And like, how true, untrue is that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like that's completely untrue. I think when you speak to some of the guys, even if actually they're not in contact with their kids, parenting never stops, right? I mean, I think they think about their kids every day. Even if they're actually not speaking to them, they're on their minds. I think it definitely is challenging, right? It's not... And there's so many different barriers that can stop the dads having as much contact with their kids. Prisons don't make it super easy even for kids to come in and visit their parents, which can be, a real challenge. But ultimately, all the guys that I work with really, really want to keep in contact with their kids. And the parenting never stops. I mean, for a lot of them, that's their one driving force to be like, I want to get out of here, right?
For bettering themselves.
Yeah, I want to better myself. I want to get to the other side so I can be with my kid. Like I can be a better dad. And I really, really feel that when they're in the room. And the other thing that is, so incredible to witness is like, I'm yet to do a program, and I've done like well over 20 programs at this point of like being on this journey at Kids Matter for 3 years, where we don't have like one or two guys in the room completely breaking down and all the other guys supporting them and being there. The sense of community for these men is huge. And I think, I say a lot that there's so many spaces for mums, right? Like if a woman finds herself and she's pregnant and she's like, becoming a mum, there's books, there's, antenatal classes, like all these things that you can do as a mum that you can kind of find and, connect and meet other women in the same situation. And I think it's so much harder for men. I think it's so much harder for dads. So the thing that's so cool about this program is obviously being in prison, like there's nothing else in that room. It's just us, a table, and some biscuits. I do usually bring in biscuits.
What kind?
Yeah, so sometimes we take requests, but I try to hit all the different... So we've got jammy Dodgers, we've got a bourbon.
Okay. You're trying to please the whole crowd.
Trying to please the whole crowd.
Yeah.
But the dads get to come into the space and they have no phones and no distractions. We don't have anything else but the table and us. And it creates a space for these men to open up and talk about being a dad and what the experience is like being away from their kids, which is so unique. It's so unique. And a lot of the guys actually say that it's the first time that they've had something like that from being a dad, even though they found themselves in prison and it's in prison, right? Which is just mad.
Yeah, because so many of them, making like a generalization, I'm sure so many of them have been dads for years. You know, some of them could have been dads for decades. And to say that space that you're creating there with Kids Matter in those prisons is the first space where they've gone, I've actually sat with other men that are also parents, and this is the most like human connection I felt about talking about this. That's a huge accomplishment. And it's also really, sad that that's the first time they're hitting that.
And I think as well, just on that, it's like for a lot of those men being in prison, you are so many other labels, right? And you are so many other identities. And actually, like, dad is not one that when you're walking around on the wings or grabbing your food or free flows happening and you're on your way to your class or you're off to your job, that's not one that you wear all the time. Yeah. So to be able to move into a space where that is who they are, they're not prisoner, they're not their prison number, right? They are just dad in that room is so powerful. It's powerful to witness and to be a part of. And, why I said at the beginning, it's such a privilege. But the level of community that then leaves a program is beautiful, is really beautiful.
You're like really facilitating these little like pockets of guys that can turn to each other. I mean, in the stuff that I've read about Kids Matter, you talk about these 3 C's, so confidence, competence, and community, just as we're talking about community there. In a prison setting, you know, you've just said community can grow, it develops in this group. How does confidence grow, and how does competence grow as well? What have you seen?
Yeah, just to go over a little bit of what you said. So the hope of the program, is to give the 3 C's. So confidence, helping them believe in themselves and trust that they can be a good parent, right? Because that's hard, especially when you've had, you know, your blueprint has been really difficult. So how you were parented is your only image of being a parent. And that was really maybe a strange or challenging or tricky for whatever reason. And then competence, so providing practical skills that support more capability and effective parenting. And that's drawn on by the research and insights by our amazing CEO, Ellie, who is also a child psychologist. And then we have another child psychologist at Kids Matter called Ben. And we have a whole programs team and lots of other people that are involved in like how the programs happen. But those practical skills come from research and from elements that really work, right? That are really going to be able to kind of give tools to these parents that when they leave that space and have gone through the program, they feel like, I can do this. I've got this.
It's tangible, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're like walking away with a certificate. You're like, okay, now I can prove to myself I can do that.
Yeah, exactly. And then, the last one, which is my favorite, which is community. And the idea of being surrounded by people in a similar situation, and people that you can confide in and lean on, that have an insight into what's going on with you. And I think that's just magic, right? I think for all of us, like as human beings, we need that. We need community. And as I was just saying with the dads in prison, like a lot of those guys will come into the space and not know other people on the table if they've come from different wings or they've not met these guys before. And they leave and suddenly like they have these mates that they've learned and got to know over the last like 6 weeks. And suddenly they've got someone to go to when, you know, things are a bit tricky with their ex-partner and they're struggling around kind of parenting teammate, or when something's coming up with, you know, their kid moving to a secondary school and it's like, oh, I actually just really want to discuss that with someone because this is, you know, something's happening here with my kid and I'm worried about it. I feel like I didn't answer your question. What was your question?
I think you did answer the question. The question was the 3 C's, confidence, competence, and community.
Yeah.
In a prison setting, where do these start to grow?
Okay.
I think you did answer that. I would just say, I would say you answered that, Megs. I really did. Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned there that the programs that you guys run are kind of developed by psychologists, this child psychologist Ellie, and that content that, you know, you lead by is written by them. You know, you say with Kids Matter that it's not about lectures, it's about the conversation, sharing and learning together, which is so like collaborative. I love that. How does it benefit your delivery to have those aims of it being like, it's conversating, it's not a classroom, it's not a workbook, it's like, let's connect.
Yeah, I mean, what we do is like we say very much when we're training people and talking about the program, it's very much with and not to. So although I am running the parenting program, I myself am not a parent, but the other people that are in that space for me, so the other facilitators that I bring in are, you know, active parents at that moment and are very much speaking from a place of this is what my morning looked like this morning. And this is what my kids said to me last night, and this is how I'm feeling about it. And I reacted in this way, and that was tough. And so there's learning for all of us. For me, like, I very much speak from the place that, as you know, I have like my dad's not in my life anymore, right? And I had like a bit of a tricky upbringing, and there's lots of themes in that room with the men that link very much into how I was parented and what that looked like for me, and then my dad leaving. And I have always just been really passionate about people in situations like my mum was quite a young mum and found herself as a single mum. And I like to think she did an amazing job. She's a legend. But it was tough. It was really tough. And I think, at that point, there wasn't a huge amount that my mum had access to. And so in kind of the ways of working, and when I started working in this world, I was always really passionate about working with parenting programs in prison. And I'm going to pause because I feel like, what did you ask me?
We're talking about why is it important that it's written by psychologists?
Yes. So
let's go back because I'll re-ask the question.
Yeah.
So I think some of what you answered it at the start and then you
veered off.
Yeah. So we'll go on to a different one.
I think what I want to say is like also that it being written by child psychologists, it actually works. The stuff actually works. And not only does it work, I think, for them connecting with their kids, which is why we're all in that space, the most important thing, and, why we work for Kids Matter and is the name of our organisation. But also, there's so many things in the programme which links to, like, actually their relationship with partner or mum, or even with themselves. There's so much learning in the programme about managing your feelings and what happens when you get to a space where actually you're really, really angry. What does that look like? Or even just being able to check in with yourself and being like, why am I reacting like this, right?
Regulation.
Yeah, stuff around regulation, which, is so important to the dads connecting with their kids, but can really grow into like romantic relationships or even the relationships with their parents or other people in their lives. I've learned so much from the program that I take back to my friends, my family, relationships. It's so useful, and that all comes from this intense research that is going on behind the background. The other thing is it's constantly being edited, right? So these programs weren't written 10 years ago, and then everyone's gone, great job, guys, feet up, cool, we've done that now. There's constantly tweaks and elements and like other research that comes out, or things that even parents say back to us in like, oh, this could have been spoken about more, or, what happens actually if you have neurodivergent kids and what does that look like? So we're constantly going back and going, okay, this needs to go in there, or, we need to tweak this, or there needs to be more about parenting teammate, because so much of how you parent also comes from the other parent you're doing it with, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we're constantly editing it, which I think is great. It's not stagnant, and we're moving with the times and also really listening to what our parents need and what they want. And
feeding it back in, which is so vital to be able to do that. I mean, I love this idea that, you're really taking into account the experiences that the guys in your sessions are having and then going, how can this benefit our delivery for the future? So much of what you're saying you work in and around is supporting parents to break the cycle of, generational trauma. You're looking at their lives and you're looking at the parenting that's come before them and the parenting that they're offering to their children, and you're intercepting and you're going, what does this need at this moment? And that's always going to change. There's a huge amount of your work that's about these guys feeling believed in their experiences and like feeling understood, their cycle of generational trauma. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's emotional talking about it because it is that. I think for so many of the men in the room, sometimes that's the first time that they've talked about actually what their parenting looked like, how they were parented. And, we have even had it actually where sometimes the guys' crimes and the reason why they're in prison is actually something to do linked with parent and it being, because of their parent. which is complex. And I think going back to the point where the reason why when we're talking about the 3 C's, the community element is so important is when you're suddenly sat in a space with people that have had, you know, not exactly the same. No 2 stories are exactly the same, but someone that's had elements of something you've been dealing with, which for a hugely long time. And for some of these guys, that is like, if they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, sometimes they think they've been carrying this and they're the only one that's ever dealt with something like this or, you know, felt like this. To suddenly hear someone and be like, oh my goodness, yeah, that's how I felt. It unlocks something in you that makes, you know, it brings hope and it brings an element of, yeah, like there is possible change that can happen. And yeah, it was great that you mentioned the generational trauma because that's what we're really trying to aim for with the program. You know, a lot of these dads that I've worked with, you know, some of them haven't known their dads before, or if their dads were in their life, it, you know, could have been really tricky and complex. You know, sometimes we get dads in the space who have an amazing relationship with their dad. But it's really, really challenging, I think, for some of these guys, especially when they've become a parent so young and dad's not been around. Like, what do you work off, right? No one gives you... Yeah, what's your blueprint? No one gives you a manual, right? When, you know, you find out your partner's pregnant, goes, amazing, here's the day. Here's the book of being dad. Good luck. You know, no one does that. You just kind of have to work it out. And if you have grown up in a family where, you know, things haven't been great and it's been really complex, it's really hard to have those skills embedded in you to be like, great, I know what I'm doing. I feel really confident. And, you know, I'm also not saying that just from this one program, it's going to completely change these guys to get to the other side and be like, amazing, I'm the world's best dad. Because, you know, it's completely ongoing. And parenting is not a stagnant thing, right? It's completely changing. Your kids are ever changing and learning and growing. And there's so many different things you come up against as a parent. And it looks completely different now from when we were kids, and phones and technologies and screens. It's just, you know, it's so different. But I think with looking at the 3 C's and what we're trying to aim, that they just have a much better start in being like, okay, cool, I know how to at least communicate with my kids well. And I have a few tools in my backpack when things go awry in the day on what to do. And I have someone to call if things go really wrong. And actually, I just need someone to tell me I'm doing an okay job, because that's what parents need to hear. You know, you're keeping that kid alive. You're doing a good job. You know, it's tough. It's really hard being a parent.
You're planting the seed, aren't you? You know, you're going, we are like achieving as much as this person is ready to achieve in these sessions. You might have someone that grabs the content like in full force and exactly and goes and replicates that with their kid. But you might also, by the sounds of things, have someone that goes back to their cell and thinks about it. And that's just as much growth. It's just not... you know, on the same timeline. It's not as linear, and it's never linear, right? I think, you know, we're coming to the end, and I'm really keen to hear the work that you're doing is amazing and complex and nuanced. I think, you know, the parents that you've worked with, I'm curious to know what stays with you the most. Like, what is it that you're left with? Is it hope? Is it pain? What is it?
Yeah, there's so many ways to answer that question. There is a lot of hope, for sure. I think, so I'm yet to have a dad turn up to my program. And as I said, like, over the time that I've been at Kids Matter, we've done well over like 20 programs now. I'm yet to have a dad walk into that space and leave and not feel like, okay, cool, I feel a bit more confident and really ready to kind of tackle the challenges that are coming up for them and also just to try and be a better dad, whatever that looks like for them. there's been lots of different success stories, sure, if we want to say that, where like we've had guys on the program who had this one dad that hadn't been in contact with his kids for 8 years and then became really close with a guy in the program. And this other guy had given him a lot of confidence to be like, mate, I think you should just write a letter and start there and try and reach out to your kids. And, we don't force anyone in the programs to do this, right? It's all very much like the individual's journey. But he felt really compelled to be like, okay, I want to do this. And over the period of time, he did write a letter and contacted his kids. And then recently, actually, I bumped into him in Brixton prison, and he's now like visiting his kid. Like, his kids are coming into the prison to see him. He's speaking to them once a week. And I mean, he said to me, doing this program has changed my life, which is an amazing thing to hear. I mean, he's changed his life. He made the decision to do that, right? The program was just a vehicle for him to go, okay, cool. And meeting that guy, giving him the confidence and like encouraging him to be like, you can do this, right? But there's been so many different, things that have come out of like dads reconnecting with their kids. And we have a lot of dads who also leave, and sometimes like things have been in a really bad position with the mother of their kids. And through this program and learning a little bit about like love languages and communication and how to work on parenting teammate, they leave and then are in a much stronger position as two people raising a child, which is huge. I think for me, that's like, one of the biggest things that comes out of this, because you never know what's going to happen in relationships, right? But when two people decide to have a kid together, you as much as it's difficult, and if you fall out with that person, that child needs to be number one priority and the thing that comes first. And sometimes, with dad going into prison, all these different things happening, that can be really difficult. So hearing that two people are able to put aside their challenges, their difference, and put their kid first, it's going to have wild, incredible effects on that young person. And they're going to be able to go on and thrive and, feel more confident, feel more loved in their life, which is our hope for every single kid that we're in, connection with this charity. And although we never see these kids directly and we're only like speaking to their parents. I mean, that's not actually true, because we do meet them on family days, but not always. But that's always what we're holding in this space, is these young people, is these small people at the center. But it is actually really cute when you see the dads on visiting days. That's just like, for me, that's the best part of the job, when like the door opens, these kids run through to their dads, and these dads just pick them up and give them a big hug, and you're like, oh, that's what it's about. That's what it's about.
You're like, yes, that's what we spoke about in like week 2.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
They're like putting it into practice.
Yeah, and doing like
full circle,
funny noises and just being playful and like not afraid to being silly. It's just magical seeing dads with their kids like that. But yeah, that's why we do it.
It's beautiful. It really is. And like I said, I think the work that Kids Matter's doing and that you're doing in these estates is incredible, really hard, and it sounds like ever changing. So, I hope it can continue and scale up and grow, and I'm excited to see what comes next. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and your, storytelling. And it's been so wonderful having you, Meg.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Experts by Experience is brought to you by Catch22. For more episodes, visit www.catch-22.org.uk.